Hey everybody, Coulter here. In today's how-to guide for bedding plant production, we're going to talk about batch mixing fertilizer for like a bulk tank. Like my bulk tank here in this greenhouse, we don't have water plumbed into this greenhouse just because of where it's at and such. So we fill this tank as we need it and then we batch mix fertilizer in it. Later I will do a video on setting up a fertilizer injector for when you do have water. That's a little bit better in my opinion as far as ease overall, but for a small greenhouse where we're doing plugs instead of growing them out in pots and such, this batch mix works great. And the other thing is, when the weather gets nice, I'll actually run a hose or something to this greenhouse from my fertilizer injector, and then I won't have to batch mix anymore. So let's get right into it. Alright, so we are ready to start mixing up our fertilizer, and I have some fertilizer here. What we use, I want to talk a little bit about water and a little bit about fertilizer, and then I'm going to kind of go over the rates and the label here a little bit so that I know exactly how much to get my fertilizer up to. The best dose that we can use in a prop house like this of fertilizer is going to be around 75 parts per million. We could push 100 parts per million like we have been here. It's just a little bit too hot, just a tiny bit too hot for seedlings. So like these peppers, they're doing pretty good right now, but they would have probably done a little better if the fertilizer hadn't been quite as hot quite as early on. And 25 parts per million is not a lot, but it can make a difference depending on what you're growing. Some things are a little more sensitive to that little extra fertility. But all these plugs from rooted cuttings and whatnot that have been coming in this week, so like this guy here, this is a petunia, headliner petunia. There's, I mean, you can see all the stuff we've got. There's geraniums and a bunch of different fillers, and we've got osteospermum, and we've got spikes that came in yesterday, and dahlias, and I think we've got more coming yet today. And the best way to maintain these is right at 75 parts per million. So my bulk tank here had 75 gallons of solution in it when we started, and I added 200. So the water level, you probably can't see it on the camera very good because of the light. Maybe you can. The water level sitting right at 275 gallons. So we added 200 gallons of water. Now I actually used water from the old well on the place because the new well, so the one that's only like 6 years old, has a little too much iron in it to put in a tank. It'll turn colors and kind of give us some trouble. But anyways, we just put water in it, and it's a little cold. I ran the hose outside. It is in the 50s today, but it's warm enough that we can water with it. You know, as long as you're like above 50-degree water, you're good to water with that water. And it's also nice and sunny today. I'm kind of squinty because the sun's kind of bright, but it'll warm up in the greenhouse here in between the black tank and the warmth in the greenhouse. This water will actually heat up pretty quick. It won't get super hot in this bulk like this. Another thing I want to mention about your bulk tank is especially if you're using a clear plastic bulk tank or like a white one, you want to paint it black. Now I haven't had any issues having a little strip here that I masked over so I can see just how much. Maybe you can see better here. You can see just how much water is in it. It's kind of nice to make sure we're pretty close. I do have a Save-A-Drop. I can put a link in the description for a Save-A-Drop. You can buy them on Amazon. You put them on the end of a garden hose and it meters water for you as if water flows through. They're really handy. There's a few things I use them for around here, and it's super handy. But the black outside does two things. One, it helps the sunshine kind of keep the water warmer, but two, it keeps the sunshine out of the water and out of the mixed solution, which will prevent algae from growing in the bottom of your tank, which is really important to keep out. We definitely don't want algae in our tank, as it will lock out and bind and consume the nutrients within the tank, and then leaves their plants to starve basically. And it can kind of just contaminate the water and make it nasty. So a few things that you're gonna need if you're gonna batch mix, whether it's bulk batch mixing for a tank or whether you're mixing for an injector, is you're gonna need a scale, you're gonna need your fertilizer, and then I like to mix up my solution in a bucket just so it's a little easier and a little cleaner to keep track of. And I can make sure my solution is fully dissolved before I incorporate it into the water. So I've got my scale here. Power it on with my container on it, so it'll just tare it automatically. And we're gonna look here at our fertilizer package. This is Jack's fertilizer. It's a professional blend. It's really excellent. It may not be suited to your case exactly, but our water tests and such show this is just a really good balanced mix for all around production for veg plants, for sale, and for flowers and stuff. Anything in the bedding stuff. This has been really good for us. Like I said, probably get with J.R. Peters' laboratory, get a water test done. I'll talk about that sometime. Also, we'll link a video in the description for how to take that water test. Put a link in the description for where to send that to, have a professional lab test it and tell you kind of what it needs for growing. Anyhow, you can see here I've got my rates. So we want 75 parts per million at 200 gallons. So if we wanted 100 parts per million at 200 gallons, we would double this rate. So we're gonna go 1.5 this rate. But what's really nice is we have 50 parts per million here, which is already half. So for 200 gallons at 75 parts per million, we will be 9.65 ounces of solution, or of fertilizer here per 100, or per 200 gallons of clean water here in our tank. So what I'm going to do is we are going to dump some of this in here until we get our proper weight. Open it up here a little bit. Alright, that was a little messier than I thought. It took me a minute. I have my bag open now enough to where I can get the fertilizer scooped out with one hand. I've got some of these containers here. You buy them online or wherever for selling food stuff. These are 16-ounce deli containers. I buy them from Webster's supply store online. They're really good pricing, really good shipping, really good service. So let's take a look here. I've got a little bit scooped out. We're going for like 9.6 to 9.7 ounces of fertilizer for this 200 gallons. So I'm gonna start pouring in here. We'll go till we get 9.6. Yep, that's right where we want to be. Between 9.6 and 9.7. So now what I'm going to do, I have my pump set up here. It's kind of neat. We'll see if we can see here. So the inlet of my pump comes through a bulkhead in the bottom of the water tank so that we can use all of the solution out of this tank by the time we're done, if we need to, or if we need to clean it out. We can get all the liquid out without having to remove the tank. And then what we can do is I have a shutoff in line down here. You can see this PVC shutoff there. And that will shut it off so that anything between that valve and my pump won't run. And then I have this spigot here, which is also on the intake side. I can dip this down into a 5-gallon bucket. So when I'm doing my chemical treat for a large quantity of plants, so the other day I did pretty much the entirety of this greenhouse all through the pump rather than through an injector or dipping them, which we'll be doing a video on dipping plants in a chemical bath here shortly. So that one allows me to pull out of a bucket of chemical solution instead of my bulk tank. And then I can also flush the whole system really well and make sure it's clean so it doesn't have the chemical in the system anymore. So now we have our fertilizer. So what we're gonna do is we're going to grab my hose. If you're mixing for an injector, which we'll talk about in a future video, we ought to be really precise about the water. In this case, we have the amount of water we need in the tank and we're pumping out of the tank, so I can put as much water in this bucket to mix my solution as I want. So I'm just going to run some water in here. I want to shoot for at least like a gallon just to make sure that we get it dissolved as much as possible. I'm actually going to run more because what I want to do is I want to get this spread out as evenly in the tank as I can. So I think, yeah, it's 2.5 gallons in my bucket right now. So we're going to take fertilizer, got a little stuck in the bottom there, and we can just pour it right into the bucket. Now I had a stir stick here, we'll see if I can find it. I like to use PVC pipe for stir stick just because I can keep it clean and I can keep track of it a little better. You can use a wooden stick as long as it's clean. Anything you can mix. Mix it till it's completely dissolved. Takes just a minute. You can see this fertilizer here actually has a blue dye in it, so you can tell when your solution is mixed, which is really handy actually. And it's just strong enough that at about 50 parts per million you can just see a very light blue hue to your water if you put it in a container, so that way you know there's fertilizer in it and it's not clear water. So I can feel that there's still just a tiny bit of grit in the bottom of my bucket. So we're gonna keep mixing. It seems to me that mixing kind of back and forth a little bit tends to mix things a little more thoroughly. There we go. Now, this solution here is pretty hot. You wouldn't want to water anything with this directly. It would burn pretty much anything pretty badly. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually mix it into this tank, and then I'm gonna agitate it to get it stirred around best I can. So, grab our bucket here. Then you can see I'm just gonna pour it in. Nice. Now I'm gonna rinse the bucket out a little bit because I noticed there's just a tiny little bit of undissolved, very, very tiny little bit, less than like a healthy pinch. But I like to have this bucket clean so that it's easy to mix properly when I mix other things in my chemicals. I've also got this bucket marked. I don't want to use a bucket that I've been using for chemicals and such for picking vegetables later. So this one will live here with this stuff, and it has chemical written on the side, just so I know that it's had fertilizer and stuff like that mixed into it. So now you can see, maybe, you can see that it's in there. Now it's not completely mixed in yet. It'll kind of have a concentrated spot right in the middle where we poured it in more or less. So now the best thing to do is to mix it. And the easiest way to do it in a system like this, I found, is to just take my water wand, pull the head off of it, run it into the tank, turn it on, and just let it run for a few minutes. What that does is you can hear the pump. The pump has turned on and it's pulling water out of the tank, and it's bringing it back up and it's pushing it into the top of the tank. And this will just kind of force the system to mix. And you only really need to do this for 2, 3, maybe 5 minutes, whatever you have time for. You can use a big stick, it's just a lot more work, and it's really equally as effective. So if you're concerned about not getting the corners, you can kind of just work your stick around a little bit, and the water movement from the pump circulating the water through the system is plenty enough to mix it. Also, you can see in the tank when your dye has incorporated well into the water, and it will be ready once you have a nice even color throughout it. You won't have like these cloudy spots of a darker blue with more clear water around it, which mine is already pretty well mixed. So I'm going to pull the wand out, and I'm going to take my lid and put it back on. This keeps debris and contaminants out of the water as well as sunlight, and it will trap heat in, so we can make our water just a little bit warmer through the sunny days, which is kind of good. I mean, it shocks the plants a little bit less if it's a little bit warmer. Now we can take any of our heads and put it back on our water wand. We really like these DRAMM yellow head water breakers. They're a little bit finer. This one needs rinsed out a little bit. They're a little bit finer, and they have a little bit of a convex cover, or the water breaker plate is a little bit more convex shaped, so your water will actually shower out, fan out a little bit more. Kind of unlike the red, has the same hole count, but it's flat faced and it kind of is more concentrated in one area. So for plugs, we really like the yellow breakers. For regular watering, we like the 400 series. These are plastic 400. You can get the aluminum ones. The aluminum ones feel a little bit heavier on the end of the wand. They're about, they're a little less than a pound, and you can feel it by the time you're done watering a couple thousand square feet. You can really feel it. These don't break the water as fine, but they have a better flow, which makes them better for watering planted stuff. Anyhow, so just a quick recap. We like to take and fill our bucket with water. We like to put our amount of mix in that we want, or fertilizer in, as per the label, to make sure that we're not making it too hot. And then we dissolve that, we put it in the tank, we circulate it around, and it's mixed. Kind of a long video for such a simple process, but I also kind of tried to explain a couple other things and reasons why, and I hope that's helpful. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe to the video. We're really shooting for 1,000 subscribers here, hopefully by June, which would be really great. And we'll see you in the next video.